So when it comes to chickens, how many chickens are enough? I have a family of 5. I got my chickens when I was a family of 4. I initially got 16 chickens. 1 died along the way. 1 I had to kill along the way. And I adopted 1 along the way, so that leaves me with 15 currently. Now the chickens that I have, they're 3 years old now, or they're just coming up on their 3-year birthday. And from a lot of what you'll read in books, the idea is to get rid of the chickens after the second molt because their egg production declines. And while that's true, with a large volume of chickens, my egg production is actually beyond what I can actually consume or what we can actually consume as a family right now. We're getting more eggs than we can deal with. One good benefit of that is you get to give the eggs away. I just gave 2 dozen eggs away to my landscaper neighbor who's helped me a lot. So you get this little social capital benefit of having these extra eggs. But how many is enough? Well, let me give you some of the numbers in regards to what I deal with the 15 chickens that I have now being 3 years of age. So those chickens are past their laying prime, but they're still putting out a ton of eggs. I don't know exactly how many they're putting out a week, but if I had to guess, I'm getting 4 to 5 dozen eggs a week right now from 15. As a family, maybe we could eat 3 dozen a week if we're really pushing it and trying to consume a lot of eggs, but 2 dozen is more likely. So I'm long 3 dozen eggs a week, which I have to do something with. I can give those away to my neighbor, like I mentioned, or I could sell them. When I had a corporate job, I was selling them. I was able to sell those for $6 a dozen. So it was a nice way to kind of pay for the feed for the eggs that I was eating and give myself free eggs. 15 chickens, it's a lot. It's probably too many. If I had to do this over, I would probably get about 8. Because right now, if you assume that each chicken is laying 250 eggs a year, which is probably an average number. Some are higher, maybe at 310. Some are lower, maybe around 210. Let's assume 250 per year. Well, with 15 chickens, that's like 3,700 eggs a year, and it's something like getting 6 dozen eggs a week. So unless you have a lot of kids, like 6, 7, 8 kids, that's probably too many eggs for most people to consume. So with 15 chickens, you're gonna be looking for some way to unload the surplus eggs. Now maybe this is where the whole farmstead idea comes into play here, where you're producing some food for your consumption, some food to sell off the homestead itself. So you're a kind of productive farm, but you're also a homestead, or you give them away or you trade them with neighbors. And that's one thing I like to have is eggs to give to my neighbors. There's something about just giving them away that feels good. So 15 for us in our context now with 5 people, one of whom only eats breast milk at this point, it's too many. So if I had to cut it back again, I'd probably go to 8. But there's other things I like about having these chickens beyond the eggs themselves if we go beyond the production. The chickens are doing a lot of things for me out here. One, they're cycling minerals through the landscape. They're able to eat a lot of the cover crops, weeds, and other things in the soil, do biological functions within their bodies to change some of those minerals or break them down, and then redeposit those minerals into the soil in a biologically available form for things like worms to then recycle. So I can take egg shells, as I've talked about in a previous video, feed those back to the chickens, and the chickens can break those eggshells down into something that's more readily available for plants and other soil biology. So I get the mineral cycling effect of the chickens on the landscape. I get the weed control effect of chickens on the landscape, which is something I really like. I like having the biological disturbance that chickens bring, doing some minimal tillage. They're not deep tillers, they're not pigs, they're not going to really tear up an area, but they will kind of wipe it out on a surface level and do surface level digging, so you get some surface disturbance from them, which I like. The other benefits of having chickens are the visual effect on the landscape. Where the chickens are, it's right outside our kitchen table. So when we look out the window, when we're eating a meal, a lot of times, depending on where the chickens are, you can see them on the landscape. And there's something cool and primal about that. It's just really nice to know that you can look out and see animals out there. It kind of makes you feel a little more connected to the planet, if you will, without going too woo-woo, where it's not like we're just this human being population living independently on the planet, in our house in the suburbs, you know, getting our food at grocery stores, seeing the chickens out there makes you feel more connected to the food system and what's actually happening. The other thing I like having chickens for is the experience that my daughters have with the chickens. It's amazing how much kids and chickens, they just work. Kids love handling them, they love going out and feeding them and playing with them. So it's been a nice babysitting tool, it's been a nice learning tool, and it's something that a lot of kids are really disconnected from when you start to talk to other parents of kids that don't have chickens. It's like some of these kids have no idea where eggs come from, and I actually worked with a lady who was about 47, and when I brought in the first set of eggs from my chickens here, she didn't even realize eggs couldn't be white. Like, brown eggs were a shock to her, which isn't so mind-blowing in today's day and age, but nonetheless, it was a little bit surprising. So I like the idea of being able to introduce my girls to some animals and the responsibilities that come with caring for those animals and keeping them healthy, keeping them safe, keeping them alive. So all in, there's a lot of benefits to the chickens. How many is enough? If you're a family of 4, 15, it's probably too much. If you didn't want to deal with selling any or giving any away, if you cut that back to 8, 7, somewhere in there, I think that's a more realistic number. If I was going to do this again, that's probably where I would have is 8. If my chickens, at some point they're going to die, they're going to go away, I'm going to have to cull them if I start over, and I can limit myself on breed selection, I'll probably have about 8. That'll do a few things for me in terms of the system. Less chickens spread out over the same amount of area obviously means the cover crop in that area is going to last longer. The impact from those chickens isn't going to be as great in such a short period of time if there's less chickens. So I think in a small area, there's a lot to be said by having less total animals just from a management standpoint. I think it would be a little easier to deal with if I had less birds out on the landscape and not having so many eggs. When, again, I go back to the egg situation, I'm probably 3 dozen eggs too many each week right now that I have to go out and find something to do with. But that's also right now when they're laying. Don't forget, there's this decline in egg production throughout the year. So our period of decline for us in Southern California that I've noticed is about November 1st, somewhere around there, to mid-January. So for November, December, part of January, production dips down to maybe a dozen a week. You know, I might be pulling an egg or 2 a day out. So the rest of the year, production's higher, but you do get that one dip in the middle of winter where I've almost had to buy eggs, which is kind of weird. After having your own chickens for a while, you don't really want to do that. So you're not going to get steady production all year. Now you can try and steady that out by leaving lights on in the coop, but I'm more of a follow biology type guy, so I want the chickens to be able to rest and recover in the winter and let them lay on their own calendar, not have me go in and manipulate that. So while I'm inundated with eggs now, there's a period, if we go back 2 months, where I didn't have any eggs. And I was thinking, do I actually have to buy eggs? So again, to help put this into context, a family of 4, 8 chickens is probably enough. You know, maybe even 5 or 6. Less is more in many ways. It's less intimidating, it's less to take care of. They'll make less of an impact on the space you have. But this has been my experience with 15. So far, so good. You know, they're still laying strong going into 3 years, and I'm really curious as to when that egg production will really drop off, and I'll have to go out and cull some of these chickens, because what I don't want to do is be feeding 15 birds that I'm not getting a lot of eggs from. I'll talk about the economics of producing a dozen eggs for yourself in a future video. It's not as cheap as you'd think. They're definitely not free eggs, so that's something to consider. The more birds, the more money you're going to spend, because these are grain-centric animals for sure. So think about that. 5 or 6 for a family of 4. That's what I'd do. Thanks for watching this one. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.